All right. Recording is started. Welcome and welcome back to those of you who have been here before to the 2017 Small Farms Winter Webinar Series. This is your friendly neighborhood local food systems and small farms educator, Andy Larson, up in northwestern Illinois. Appreciate you joining us once again today. We're going to do our best to fit within the space of your lunch hour. Got a lot to deliver as usual, so please understand why we are limiting your questions to the text box at the left, and please do ask them, type them in throughout the course of the presentation. We will have a few educators joining us, and we can have some answers during and also after. I can be directing some things to Dr. Angela Shaw. I will be emailing a link to the recorded presentation just as soon as possible after this webinar concludes. There will also be a link for a typical, very short online evaluation, and I hope someone can testify in the text box that they're extraordinarily short and should take less than a minute to complete, so we very much appreciate your willingness to give feedback. If you're having difficulties with Skype for Business, I apologize, and I don't know what to do about it. I've done my best to get most of this stuff running smooth on the central end. If you have any questions for your local machine, that might require some local troubleshooting. Anywho, this week's presentation is from Dr. Angela Shaw. I worked with Angela right when she came on board at Iowa State, and it's super cool to have her joining us from over there in Ames. Dr. Angela Shaw is an associate professor in, what is the name of the department now, Angela? Give me
Food science.
Just food science? Is that long enough? That's
Food science, human nutrition.
okay. She's also an extension food safety educator. She is also a project director for, okay, let's see if I can get this right, the North Central Region Center for FSMA Training, Extension, and Technical Assistance. Is that the whole deal?
Yes, it is.
Woo, hot diggity. So we're really, really glad to have Angela joining us today. And with that, I am going to let you take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for both Andy as well as Mary Hosier for inviting me to this webinar series. Today we're going to talk about some of the activities that we've been doing with the North Central region, but I want to focus on Illinois. A lot of you have been participating in our needs assessments where we're doing, and we have one currently out there if you have not taken our needs assessment, but I want to talk about some of the results that we have, as well as I want to dive in a little bit into the FSMA produce rule and really getting back into exemptions. What does it mean to be a qualified exempt, and some of those details that I'm continuously getting questions about. So let's jump right into it. So if you don't know who we are, we're the North Central region. We compose the 12 states, and that goes from the Dakotas over to Ohio. So the Missouris, the Iowa, Illinois, and we have 11 land grant institutions that are part of this. And we are here to basically help with FSMA compliance with growers of fruits and vegetables, as well as processors of fruits and vegetables. And we will deal with both the produce safety rule as well as the preventive controls rule. To give you a brief overview of kind of what our objectives are, the first one is we want to have a community of growers and educators to be able to share. So within the group, we've been doing a lot of knowledge sharing of what programs are currently occurring related to food safety around the region, what resources have been developed around the region, and we're sharing that on our website, ncrfsma.org. So ncrfsma.org, you can find all the partners. If you want to become a partner, there's contact information there as well on how to get more involved. The second element to our project is to do these regional needs assessment, to really hone into our region and our unique needs. Unlike the rest of the nation, we are composed of a lot of small farms, hobby farm, And we want to make sure that this population, as well as some of our niche populations, like our Amish populations, our Hmong populations, are being reached with knowing what to do as far as compliance goes. We hope to take these needs assessments, and you'll see the results here in a second from Illinois, and develop food safety programs targeted towards those needs for our region. So unlike the other regions, we're not dealing with mass production, and we have a lot of unique products. So we want to make sure that it's both technology and non-technology based. And I'll talk about some of the results because we're moving more towards non-technology based curriculum. And then we want to continuously evaluate to make sure that what we're developing is actually usable and friendly for our population of growers and processors, you. So we have three key teams. I'm part of the core team here at Iowa State. We have state leads, which means that we have one person identified within each state. For Illinois, that is Mary Hosier. And so if you have additional questions, she is the person for you. We also have representation from each region. And so within Illinois, we have Amy, as well as I believe it is also Mike is the representative from this region as growers. But once again, if you want to become more part of this program, please let us know and we can get you actively involved in what we're doing. So I want to focus a little bit today about our needs assessment we conducted. The goal with the needs assessment was to administer a two-rounded Delphi approach. And what this does is it took the rule, the produce safety rule, and it asked basically, what is your knowledge on each of these areas of the produce rule? And do you have an information needs? It also asked, what is your preferred method for delivery? And it had a lot of room for comments. So we concluded with our round one, which I'm going to present the results for Illinois, and we're currently in the process of doing round two, which will end here in less than a week. With round one, we had 399 respondents. I'll probably go back. 399 respondents. Half of those came in paper copies, so we'd paper delivery, and half of those came in electronic versions. So you do have the option of going to our website, ncrfsmarightnow.org, and taking the online survey, or we have paper versions if you have anybody that you might know that won't go online and have that option. So what were the priorities for Illinois that came out? So let's first talk about what is the response rate that we got from Illinois to give a little bit of background on the data. So we had 15 respondents out of the 400 basically that we had. It was a mix of male and female. I believe it was like 47 to 53, so basically 50% mix of male to female. The average age was about 48. The average years of farming was about 9 years. The average acreage of produce production was 19 acres. And the top crops that were produced for market were tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, herbs, and lettuce. The average number of employees for this group was 9, and the majority of them had farmer as their major occupation. They were currently selling to farmers markets. Farmers market was by far number 1. Grocery stores, institutional food service, as well as restaurant and caterers as a top. So let's talk about what the top needs were. The first one was related to water. So the water portion of the produce safety rule has been the major kind of bottleneck for a lot of people on not knowing, is their water safe, how to test my water, when to test my water, where can I send my water samples to be tested, how frequent can I go, do I need to test my water source if I need to be in full compliance of the rule. And so it came out, wasn't a surprise that within Illinois, the number 1 needs for water was the frequency of water testing. And then the second one being how to interpret water testing results. Now on our slides, I have an asterisk there, and what that shows is that was also a top need for the region. And what you'll see throughout this presentation is that a lot of the top needs for Illinois were not top needs for the region as in general. So this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity to do some specialized educational material and target the needs of the state. So I'm charging Mary and her food safety team to develop additional things outside of what we have, what we are going to develop to target some of the needs within the state. So to meet those needs, what I have done, and on our website, NCR FSMA, you can find all of these resources that I have present and in clickable form, meaning you can go there and have a direct link under our resource column to get some of these things. So what resources are currently available to help with the frequency of water testing, how to interpret? The first one is the Produce Safety Alliance has developed both an extension article that breaks down frequency of testing of water, as well as a decision-making tree that talks also about which water is most safe than other water sources. So just for knowledge, just sharing right now, we recognize that municipal water supplies, or water that is coming from the city supply, is seen as the safest. Now it's seen as the safest because municipal water supplies must be tested on a daily basis based on the EPA standards to prove that it is safe for drinking. As we go down the level of water from safest to less safe, the next one is well water. Now we know there's a lot of different well water systems you can have. Some that are directly linked to municipal water, some that are off branch or linked to some of the water sources, and then there's also independent wells. So within the rule, it says that we should make sure that you have enough water samples throughout your time to prove that whatever well water system you have is safe. And so the magic number is 236 colony forming units per 100 milliliter. And that's the safe element that we see there. And then the least safe product we'll see is then surface water. So coming out of a pond, a lagoon, or what have you, that is the least safe. And that requires the most amount of samples over time to make sure that is. Now, how do I calculate or how do I interpret my data? There are two different resources available that I have linked here. University of Arizona has a complex website that talks all about water testing. They have an online calculator, which basically, when you get your test results back from a local lab, you can just plug that into the calculator and it will tell you I'm in compliant or not. Now, if you don't want to use a technology-based method, University of California, Davis has a printable Excel sheet that you can just download onto your computer and then once again could do the same calculations for you. I've shared here on our screen that article from the Produce Safety Alliance, and it talks about all of the different testing that is required, the frequency of testing based on your water source, and once again, if you go to ncrfsma.org, we have a direct link to this website and this article that will give you a lot of details that will pertain to yourself. This is the online calculator that I talked about from University of Arizona. And as you can see, it's just simple boxes where you put in the dates of the sample, sample location, and what lab results you have, and it shoots out a profile of what your water source is. Now this is University of California, Davis's resource, and it is a spreadsheet, but once again it has the same columns and it will calculate for you what your geometric mean is, which is important, and ultimately will tell you, is that water safe or not? The decision-making tree is a great resource as well, and these can be found at Cornell related to water, on having logs, language, and having decision making on is there a better water source for you?
Angela, I'm not hearing you anymore. Okay, hold on just a second, folks. Angela, you went offline for just a second. Yep, we know you can't hear. Just hold on one moment. We're figuring this out. Angela's still going. She's moving slides. Hold on. Ah.
I think I'm back.
I think you're back.
So everything went blank. I don't know what happened.
That's really weird. For some reason, you fell off the presenter list, but you're back again. So, I think we're the slide before this, and you can start on that, please.
Okay, I do apologize. Yeah, everything went blank. And then I saw, we can't hear her, we can't hear her. I'm sorry.
That happens to the best of us. I go blank all the time.
So I was saying that this is a resource that Cornell has for water testing. The second biggest needs area for the group was related to biological soil amendments from an animal origin. The title, oh my goodness. So what it means is, what is the difference between doing manure, raw manure application, and composting? So what are the standards? How do I know if my composting methods are good enough for the rule? So the top needs, which correspond with the regional needs, are what tests are required and the frequency of tests. And with this question, I will point back to it. It does not really, the frequency of the test and the types of tests reflects how you're going to utilize your biological soil or your fertilizer treatment. So let me break it down. The produce safety rules recognizes the organic standard. So we recognize the organic standard says that if you apply, then you have to wait 4 months, and then you're good for harvesting. So it does recognize that. But it says also that you do not have to follow the organic standard of waiting, having that wait period. What it says is, if you have proof that your raw manure, when you're applying it, and at the time of harvest, if it's touching your produce, is safe and does not have E. coli, salmonella, or listeria, then it's safe to harvest from. So what it's doing is it's taking away kind of these magical numbers of you have to wait 80 days or 90 days. It's really putting it on the grower to say, you know best your raw manure that you're utilizing, and if it's free of these pathogens, you've determined that, and so once again, that's where testing comes in, then you are safe to put it in and harvest whenever you want to. Now, it also puts in parts for compost. So it says that you can follow the normal 165, the turns ratio for compost, but it also says if you have information or have data that supports your composting method, then that will also be acceptable by the produce safety rule. So this section has had a lot of people like up in the air on, I don't know what to test, I don't know where to go. So what resources are available? Let's jump into those. So I found this resource, and it is really, 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 really good. And once again, it's linked to on our NCR FSMA. It breaks it down, the difference between manure and compost by the rule. And it outlines, so if you are going to apply variations of manure, things like fish meal, onto your crops, what does that mean? And how do you go from there? So it's a good document to have. Oh, I thought I had them all up there. Let me go back. There's also an educator group recording that I linked to on the website. And during this group recording, we actually talk about the different practices that we're seeing around the country and how they apply to the FSMA rules. So we've linked to that as a resource as well. And we have a decision-making tree that's out there. And we have a fact sheet that breaks down these rules even further. So what is the next need? The next need that we're seeing with the group is the idea of domesticated and wild animals, specifically exclusion practices. So the rule plainly says that they recognize that you are going to have wild animals within your field. They recognize we're going to see deer, rabbits, raccoons. Everybody knows that. But the question is, so what is good enough for exclusion? So I want to clarify just for a moment, because this was a unique one for this region, or for this state specifically, is that the rule does not say that you have to keep all wildlife out of your facility or out of your farm. What it says is you need to have an observational program or a program in place that helps you to monitor the activity in your field. So if you see that you or know you have a rabbit problem and there's droppings everywhere, so what are you doing to make sure that you're not harvesting lettuce, say, that might have droppings on it? Or if you know that it doesn't matter, birds are always going to be present, but what are you going to do when you see fecal feces on your tomato in the field? So what practices are you doing? What are you doing to deter these animals from being in your field? It also talks about domesticated animals. And so your dogs, your cats, recognizing that I know several growers around the region that their dogs know they're not to go into the field. And if that's the case, that's wonderful. But if not, if you don't have that level, then if your dog goes out into the field, how are you going to make sure that they are not urinating or doing fecal matter within your field? And I always give the lovely story of Linda Nave, who many of you guys know is our SARE coordinator. She's been around the whole region. And she said she was giving this presentation, and we were talking about broccoli, and the dog that was on the farm came up and just used it right on the broccoli right before they were about to harvest. So we know that they're not potty trained. It's just an example of exclusion practices. The next one within the region is thinking about the top needs that aren't identified by the region, but also are on the top of our list. And so the type of water samples, and sorry, that's an editing error. Oh no, you're
Angela,
not seeing
we're not seeing your slides advance, I don't think. What number are you on right now?
I'm on 20.
Oh, I'm on 17. Hold on. I'm going to take over as presenter for... Do you have a button that says take over? There you go. Now you're moving again. Yep. You're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
It keeps on popping off. I don't understand.
I think somewhere the hamster that's running Iowa's internet is, taking a water break or something.
Oh, yeah.
No offense to you Iowans. I love Iowans. I lived over there for a long time. Keep going. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry if everybody's not seeing, but I'm on slide 20, and Andy, will you be providing, I don't mind if you provide my PDFs as well of this presentation.
I can do that.
That's perfect for anybody who just wants to go through them as well. So what are some of the top needs that were not identified by Illinois that other regions had? The number one are the types of water tests required. so that's supposed to be water, not eaters. Water test requires, and where to. Another one was thinking about crop protection from fecal matter. So what are some practical ways that you can prevent that? And then the third one is we need to train our workers. So what does that content look like? What are the requirements of the content as you think about that? So what were the preferred methods for delivery of this material? The majority of them were web-based handouts, so easy PDFs, one-on-one consultations, some online modules, but very, very short, as well as extension publications and fact sheets. And I would say that the whole region, as in general, was not a fan of Facebook and Twitter. We've eliminated our Twitter account. We didn't have a lot of activity there. We do have our Facebook account still, but people said, no, don't deliver material that way. So those are really the focus we're going to have going forward. So I'm going to jump in quickly, and I'm sorry, with all my technical difficulties, I'm running behind.
That's okay. I just posted up, by the way, I posted up your slides as a PDF. If you click on the little blue computer monitor button at the bottom of your screen, you can download the PDF of Angela's slides.
Perfect. Thank you. So what are some of the common FSMA produce rule questions that we get? And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. So I get a lot of questions related to GAP certification, organic certification, and what is the difference between those and the FSMA produce rule. So the first thing you have to recognize is GAPs and organic certification are all market-driven certifications. Both certifications do not meet all the standards of the produce rule. I repeat, they do not meet all the standards of the produce rule. So there are a lot of differences in the way that water is handled, biological soil amendments from an animal origin, aka manure and composting, as well as worker training procedures. So those are the major differences between them, but there's even differences based on states and group GAP versus regular GAP certification. And if you ever have any questions at the end of the slide, as well as you have my resource, I get calls all the time, extension, give me a phone call if you have questions specific to those differences. I also get a lot of questions related to food hubs or food cooperatives or cooperatives and they want to know, where do I fall? Which rule applies to me? Does the FSMA produce rule apply to me? Does the preventive controls rule apply to me? And really I ask a series of questions. The first question is, how are you filing your food hub or cooperative status? And who is the owner of that food hub? Because you have to consider that when you consider income, as well as if you are just a warehouse or you're part of the farm and an extension of the farm. So if the owner is separate from the produce that's being produced, so these are separate entities, and so basically the food hub is buying the produce and they're repackaging it and selling it, that's a warehouse situation. Versus the food hub actually producing some of the produce, and so they have to include that income going forward, and they could be considered a secondary farm. You also have to consider, is there refrigeration in your facility, and is it for safety or for quality? So a lot of food hubs or these distribution centers have refrigerators, but it's more for shelf life. It has nothing to do with the safety of the product. Now, safety concerns would come in if you're actually processing. So you're chopping up things and putting in a bag. And in that instance, you are now a full-on food processor in all parts of it. So once again, got questions related to this, let me know. Another question I frequently get is my produce covered or not? And so what we need to determine is that produce rarely eaten raw versus eaten raw produce? So the difference between a potato and a carrot, for example. So a carrot, you're typically eating that raw without any processing. A potato, you are going to cook that. So there's that cook step. So rarely eaten raw products or produce items are not seen as having a food safety risk because you're cooking it and you're eliminating the bacteria. And so when you're processing your produce in your facility, you need to keep this in mind as far as separation of these produce items. So what I recommend is those produce items that are commonly eaten raw, so things like carrots, celery, onions, tomatoes, process those first, and then process those that are commonly eaten cooked. So then process your potatoes and all of that. That way you're going from less risk to more risky products. Another question I frequently get is, who is going to inspect my facility? And in Illinois, FDA is going to be your inspector. And so when will it happen? They estimate between 2020 and 2023, depending upon your size, as well as depending upon your priority for when you'll actually see. Now, the focus of FDA is going to be on those that are specifically, no doubt, the larger, those that are doing a lot of leafy greens, those are seen as high-risk products, a lot of the melon products, those are going to be the most high-risk products and the ones that are going to be inspected first. So, moving on to exemptions. And I always like to go over this so that make sure that everybody's on the same page. So, is your farm exempt or not? So, is your farm's annual 3-year average sale of all your produce? All your produce. So, that is both your rarely eaten raw and your eaten raw produce. If it's over 25,000, then we have more questions to ask. If it's under 25,000, then you are exempt from the rule. And I'll tell you what that means. Now, if your produce, all produce, is over 25,000, and you say yes, then I have a few more questions for you. Is that produce going to be further processed? Meaning, is it going to be, or is it rarely eaten raw? Meaning, further processed, meaning, is it going to be canned? Is it going to be have some type of acidification to it that's going to kill bacteria? Is that produce rarely eaten raw? Is the 25,000 potatoes? Or is that produce for personal use or use on your farm? So if you answer yes to any of these, then you are exempt. If you answer no to any of these, then we must move on with our questions. So we went over what is covered and what is not covered already, so I'm going to skip through some of these. And you guys have my slide decks. So what is rarely consumed raw? Everything asparagus, collards. So you have a whole list of what's listed in the produce rule that I'll go over. So now we have this qualified exempt. So you've gone through, and now we're going to look at food sales. So is your annual food sales less than 500,000, and you sell over half of that to a qualified end user? So what is a qualified end user? It is a consumer. So if you're selling directly at a farmer's market, if you're selling to a restaurant, if you're selling to a grocery store, then you are considered a qualified end user. If you're selling to a food hub or a food cooperative, that is not a qualified individual, because once again, they are going to be selling to somebody else. So keep that in mind when it comes to qualified individuals. So if you are a qualified exempt person, you still must follow a few things. So if you meet these standards and you say, my food sales is less than 500,000 and that I sell the majority of my products to a qualified end user, then these are the things that you're still required to do. The first one is the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. And if you don't know me, I love the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. It basically says that anything that you put on the market shall not cause somebody to get sick or ill from eating it. So this is a rule that most lawyers sue on, the principle they sue on for any type of product. So if you go to even a restaurant and you eat something that makes you sick, they're going to sue on this because, once again, all produce that you are selling to a consumer, it shall not make somebody sick or kill them. The second thing that you're required to do, is have records. Have records of your qualified exemptions. So proof that your produce is less than 500,000 and that the majority of your sales goes to a qualified end user. And it is your responsibility that every year you review your records to determine if you are. Because once again, it's a 3-year average. So say you had two very, very low years and you have a big year. So over time, that big year is going to come into play. The next part is with labels. So it does require you to have your name, your complete address on your produce in a way appropriate to your market. So I get this question a lot. So what does that mean? I'm at the farmer's market. Do I have to put a label on all my products? No. You can have a poster, a sign, any type of cardboard out. It's just a way for consumers to know what your business name is and address if they felt like they got sick from you. And that has to be displayed. That could also be if you're servicing to, say, a grocery store. So that could be on the bill of sales. So that invoice that you're providing them is good enough for them to have that complete information. So we've gone through, am I exempt or not, or if I'm qualified exempt. If you do not fall in any of those categories, then you must be in full compliance of the rule. What does that mean? That means that your farm has an average of all the covered produce of more than 25,000. So all the covered produce, all produce that you sell over 25,000, or you have made greater than 500,000 in all your food sales, with half of it going to a qualified individual, or you're not servicing half of it to a qualified end user within 275 miles of where you're at. So if any of these apply to you, then you must be in full compliance of the produce rule. This compliance chart shows the dates of compliance and when you need to. And so depending upon if you have sprouts, I understand you guys just learned all about sprouts last week, or related to water testing and retention. Now, my suggestion to everybody on this call is please go to a Produce Safety Alliance training. It is a step above what our typical GAP training is, but it will help with this knowledge transfer. Now, we're in the process of concluding our round 2 data right now, and so you still have a few days to go onto our website, ncrfsma.org, and go and complete that. We will be doing priority setting for educational development as well as supplemental development going in from May to December. And our focus areas really are going to be on water, helping with biological soil amendments, aka manure and composting, and making sure everybody is clear on that, as well as education. We will focus a lot on education. So if you want to have additional information, I've left a lot of time out. for taking questions from the whole group. But this is my email. So if you don't remember my email, Angela ML at Iowa State, you can remember ncrfisma at iastate.edu. Or our website is ncrfisma.org. So ncrfisma, get in your head. And you can find a lot of different resources available for that. So with that, that was a very quick overview.
Well, you didn't expect to cover every detail of the rule in the space of an hour, did you?
No, not at all. But I will take specific questions or anything that you might have out there.
And while we're waiting for questions to get typed in, Mary Hosier just reminded folks about March 21st, SIU in Carbondale. There is going to be a Produce Safety Alliance grower training workshop. So if you're interested in attending one of those workshops that Angela just suggested, please go ahead and click on that link and sign up. All right, Zach has a question for you, Angela. Any updates about when the FDA guidance document for the produce safety rule is going to be released?
So at our last meeting that we had in Tampa, Florida, they told us that it was tantalizingly close to being ready.
Yes, because that's how I describe food safety rules. Tantalizing.
Well, FDA told us there's levels to being close, and so that is like right at the tip. So once again, if people don't know, as far as guidance goes out, there always has to be a budget risk assessment for anything that is produced. And so they have to go through that extra level of, they'll develop it, and then they have to wait for the budget committee to approve it. So they say that it's close, but I don't know what that means. I don't.
So it could be any moment now, it sounds like.
I hope so.
Okay, other questions out there. And we do have some of our Illinois food safety extension people who are specializing in this as well online. So you'll have good information from a variety of folks. Okay, James Theory is one of our extension educators, Angela. A grain miller would like to write a food safety plan. Can they do a HACCP-based plan?
So I also work in the grains industry a lot, and the answer is, I want to say no. And the reason why I say that is a lot of our grain millers are going to be falling under the human food rule. So the produce safety human food rule, as well as the animal food rule, depending upon where they're servicing that. So they will be required to transfer over their plans to the different format than HACCP. And there are a lot of differences between HACCP and preventive controls, human food rule. And I see the second question is who will inspect them.
Right.
That also depends on the state. What I can tell you for our state, we are training up our current regulators that are doing a medicated feed as their inspection to do these FSMA inspections. But every state is different. Some will contract out, and I know that your state FDA will be the contract people, but that does not mean that your ag won't take that back. And that's one thing that Iowa, we are FDA inspected, but our Department of Agriculture has taken back that role and are being trained. So I can't say for Illinois, I'm not sure, but we've taken that role because we don't want someone who has never been in a grain elevator or a mill to ever step foot in one. It will be horrible. That's saying it nicely. Oh, I'm being recorded.
Evidence. Your thoughts about the effects of the new administration on the FDA inspection timeline of 2020 to 2023?
So my my thoughts are what I've heard from USDA. I can tell you what I've heard from USDA and FDA. They're very fearful on budget cuts and where that's going to fall. So, one good thing that occurred before the last administration left was they secured funds for USDA and FDA for a lot of our project for 2 years. And so that left our inspectors units as well as any of our granting agencies to have at least 2 years of solidified funds that is written into legislation. After that, we don't know what's going to happen. It's all up to what gets cut and what happens with the administration. But they did try and put some provisions in there. They expect that travel and all that's going to be cut as well. But so that's where we're at.
Anything else out there? Mary just posted a link.
And we'll make sure that all the links that are available are on the website. And Mary also posed that there is a grower training. So say you cannot make that grower training. What is your option? Well, we have a beautiful calendar on the NCR FSMA website that shows all the trainings and happenings throughout the whole region. So you have the opportunity to go and see what else is out there. As well as we have links to the Produce Safety Alliance that has a list of trainings throughout the whole region. And just to give you guys, since you guys are our buddies, we will be in Dubuque coming this fall providing preventive controls trainings or the produce safety trainings in Dubuque coming this fall. So if it's not too far from y'all, then you can.
And do you expect that there is going to be proceedings available?
I think so. We should.
Okay. Cool. Anything else out there?
Are there any questions that you have? It may be personal to you, but it probably is going to apply to a lot of people out there. So any specific you have related to the rule you've been hearing about, I can potentially answer.
Questions about training your dog not to poop in the field?
Well, there are several. Even here on our farm, they have a dog, and he knows not to go out in the field. So we don't really have that concern. But if they're not, then,
For a nonprofit. So
nonprofits, it's the same way. You still have to file your taxes. So the question that I would have is it for donation or is it for sales? So if they're above 25,000 for all their produce and they're not going to be further processing it or anything, then yes, then they potentially could be. But once again, are they doing qualified end user? Because then if they're over 25,000 but under 500,000 and they have that half qualified end user going directly to a qualified end user, then once again they'll be a qualified exempt, which means they don't have to be in compliance with the whole rule. So if it's directly fed to guests, then yes, that's a qualified end user. So if all of that 25,000 of produce is sold directly, then that puts you into that qualified exempt category. And then you will have to just have records, labeling, and all of that, that modification.
Okay, I do want folks to know that if you haven't done it before, you can download Angela's slides by clicking on the little monitor, the little blue monitor sign at the bottom, and clicking Show Content. manage content, and then you can open the PDF and download it. So if you're wondering where I posted that, click on that little blue monitor and you will be able to download it. Okay, Christine asked, does it matter if you're selling off your own farm, Angela?
So is the question, is it a farm stand? Or is the question you have a restaurant or a retail, you're considered like a retailer? Because that could change things. If you're considered like a retailer or a restaurant, then that falls under the FDA food code. But if it's a farm stand or retail chiller on your own property, then once again, that has to be counted. And so once again, I want to clarify that they're not consuming it on your property, because any on-farm consumption of products does not count. But if they're taking it off your property, then that does count. So I'm taking it as a consumer.
Super. Angela, I think we're going to leave it there for today.
Okay.
I want to say thank you very much to Dr. Angela Shaw, assistant professor in food science and human nutrition at Iowa State University, an extension food safety specialist, and project director for the North Central Region FSMA Center, and all sorts of other responsibilities she's got going on. I also want to thank you guys for joining us today, as usual. I hope you got some information that's going to be useful to you in your small farms endeavors. I am going to send you a link to the recording of this webinar. It'll be housed on our Illinois Local Foods YouTube channel that you guys should be familiar with by now. I'm also testing something on that YouTube channel. I have been taking the chat pod off of those recordings because we got a little feedback that it was sort of annoying when trying to watch that on the YouTube video. So if people prefer or don't prefer that, I'd love your feedback as to how that is working for you. Next week, you got to listen to me. Yeah, exactly. Next week, I'm going to be your presenter. We're going to be talking about growing your hobby farm into a business and how and if and when you should consider doing things like that. So, if you want to learn a little bit more about that topic, I would love to have you along if you can tolerate me for more than the 2 minutes at the beginning and the 2 minutes at the end. So, Angela, again, thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording, and we will see you very soon.